Hot take, hot take. A lot of hot
Noah,
takes.
Noah gave that, what was it, an olive branch? He gave it to a big old slug. The slug brought it back.
Oh my gosh.
No, just to a big swole dude who could run so fast he could just run on water. Like he just, you know. But yes.
We are way off topic.
Good day, good morning, good evening, all of my friends out there in the Super Agile Bros family. All of my family in the Super Agile Bros family. You're more than friends. Just welcome to another episode of Super Agile Bros. You already know who it is. It's your boy, Bradston. And of course, we got our boys in the building, our brothers in the building. First up, we got our boy Kyle, my brother Kyle. How you doing, sir?
We are here. I am doing great today. I like the new intro. It kind of reminded me of like the daily stand-ups where you're with like an international team and you have to say
yes.
all the time zones. Good morning.
Yes, good morning. Central Standard Time, Eastern Standard Time, Mountain.
I see you, PST. I see you.
And, of course, introducing the boy, the brother himself, Steve. How you doing today, Steve?
You know, we're not actually like in the building.
We're in the building.
Like I should. We're not.
This is our building.
Yeah.
On the
This
world.
is our place.
Our building
our
is
time.
on the world. It's not in the world.
We are England. Have you guys seen The King?
The
Become
king.
England. Make the space between you, England. What a weird speech.
That is an interesting speech.
How do you do that?
You know,
I mean, he was saying this to a bunch of men who thought they were about to die. So, you know, you say anything you want as long as it sounds hype, I guess.
that's what I'm saying. I feel like standards for epic speeches back in the day were low. You just had to say a thing before battle. Don't forget the peaches! Don't forget the peaches!
They didn't have, you know, media covering every word, every slip up. And
True.
They didn't have Twitter out here roasting people live.
And no speakers. So the people in the back didn't know what they were saying. It was like,
Yeah, they just assumed it sounded good.
You have
all that enthusiasm. It must be great.
You have like Genghis Khan tweeting out, about to go into battle, throwing dead bodies over the over the wall right now. You know, so you know.
Can you imagine?
Hashtag
like,
hype.
When do you think they started having translators doing like sign language? I know, like it feels like I only did that recently, where people would actually be next to someone who was doing a speech and signing the speech. But I wonder, like, if that ever happened back in the day. I guess American Sign Language isn't even that old.
No. I feel like literally most of the things that are like actually for people who have any type of disability or anything happened in the last like 50 years. You know, like otherwise you just had to figure it out. Like, you're blind? Good luck. Oh, you're deaf? Good luck.
We all know people didn't have disabilities before
Yes.
about 70 or 80 years ago. So they didn't need that kind of stuff.
Yes. Very true. That's
They came with the Industrial Revolution.
That's right.
That's
when
historical.
people started getting cancer,
History.
started being autistic. You know,
Know your history, fam. Know your history. Know what.
Yes.
You got to know the truth. You know,
Birds aren't real.
yes.
Birds are new.
If you have a history test, come here first.
Super Agile
They
fam.
retroactively added birds to the Bible just
Yeah,
to,
man.
you know, cover
They
their
didn't
tracks.
exist.
Ooh. Hot take.
Hot take. A lot of hot
Noah,
takes.
Noah gave that, what was it, an olive branch? He gave it to a big old slug. The slug brought it back.
Oh my gosh.
No, just to a big swole dude who could run so fast he could just run on water. Like he just, you know. But yes, please.
We're way off topic.
Our hot takes are so hot garbage. But so to get on today's topic, so you might have already seen the title, maybe you haven't, but today we're going to talk about games. You like that? We're going to talk about games. Unique topic. Nobody's ever done it before.
For the first time
The first
ever.
time ever. The first place you'll ever hear. But honestly, what we're going to talk about today is what makes a perfect game. Or maybe another way to say is what makes a game a 10 out of 10. So for me personally, where this comes from, and you know, I suggested this topic to the brothers, was there's been a game that recently came out that's been kind of rocking the game world, right? Elden Ring, and it's been getting a lot of 10 out of 10s and a lot of perfect scores. And there was some discussion within the Super Agile Bros Discord about it, kind of people giving their opinions. And I figured it'd be a good topic to cover because, as far as I know, us three in this brotherhood have not played Elden Ring, but we've played other games that have gotten 10 out of 10s. We've probably ourselves rated other games 10 out of 10 or perfect games. So I figured it'd be a good conversation to talk about. So I guess let me ask you guys straight out the, gate. Is there a thing, in your opinion, as a 10 out of 10 game or a perfect game? We'll base level. See where, do you guys think it's possible to be a perfect game or a 10 out of 10?
That's an interesting question. I think for anything to be perfect in its own right, it has to have a very specific, I guess. Like the criteria has to be well known, or definitely not like questionable what its goals were. Because I don't think there can be a game that's the perfect game for everyone, and in every genre it's perfect, for every audience it's perfect. I don't think that's possible. But for a game that fits a niche, appeals to a genre, and set out to do something and accomplishes it well, I think a game in that right, and an experience in general really, could be perfect.
Cool. How about you, Steve?
Yeah. I will say I think that for the most part, the perfect game is going to be subjective, because there's going to be people are just going to have preferences, right? Even if you say, oh, well, I just don't like this genre, that's one thing. It could still be a perfect game for that genre, for the people who do like that genre.
Yeah.
But I think that there's probably some things that people just won't like. Like maybe I like a game that's really open and where the weapons are breakable. Maybe I think Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is a perfect game. But maybe some people are just so delicate and prissy and spoiled, and they think, oh, their weapons should never break, and it should just be easy and not have to think about things. Maybe that's how it is.
Wow, that seems very personal.
You got something you want to say, Steve?
You want to
put your dukes up, I guess.
You want to call out somebody by name? I don't know what's going on here, but I don't know. Somehow I feel offended, and I actually like
too many people to name. I
like breakable weapons, but that's a whole nother problem. No, I feel y'all both. I think as I was thinking about just now, I feel like, of course, the perfect game doesn't exist. Nothing perfect exists, right? Like, we all know this. But I do think that the concept of perfect game or perfect anything is, like you said, subjective, but also is something that achieves the thing that it, was trying to do. Exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, there's games that I personally don't like the gameplay, or I don't like, for whatever reason, that I can still respect for being the perfect example of that type of game. Like when you see it and, you play it, you're like, wow, this is like, if they were trying to really do a thing. Like for me, like, I know like and maybe we don't have to get into well, I guess we could start this conversation and just get into it. But what I really mean. Let's get into it. Is like, for me, like, for example, the original Walking Dead, in its time, what it was trying to do and what it was trying to achieve really felt like the perfect game in its own way. First of all, I actually don't think it's a 10 out of 10 game. I've played it, and there's some things that I personally don't like about it from a gameplay perspective, particularly when they take you away from the kind of like choice-driven narrative type situation, when they want you to do like kind of quick time events. Didn't really enjoy those that much. But I think what it was trying to do and evoke a feeling of like making decisions that matter, that have impact, and that you walk away from, like, almost, I don't want to say you're changed, but it makes you like reflect on yourself. I feel like it's the perfect game, like in the sense of like really making you decide, man, this is a bad, or like there's sometimes in life there isn't the right choice. There's just a choice that you have to make. And I feel like, The Walking Dead, particularly the Telltale games, the first season really did that, in my personal perspective, like perfect. So I say all to say, like,
wait,
yeah.
Go, finish your thought, but before you continue to the next thought, I wanted to interject.
Yeah, I mean, all I was gonna say is, so that's what I mean by, like, I think a game can be perfect, but but it's really just about what it's trying to achieve. You know what I'm saying? So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. So now, yeah, based on what you've said, you've kind of jingled something inside of me, deep inside.
Uh-oh.
And so I want to say that if there is
That's
such a
what that
thing as a
sound
perfect
was.
game, I think a lot of games can actually meet that standard. And what that would mean for me is, like you said, based on what the developers set out to do, based on the decisions they make, if those are implemented well. And there's probably some wrong decisions, like, oh, I made this decision, it's just objectively wrong. But in terms of like more subjective decisions, I would say as long as it's perfectly implemented, then, in every aspect, like if the writing evokes what you wanted it to evoke, if the story is interesting, if the characters are interesting, if you want them to be interesting, if whatever, if the movement feels good, if the mechanics are balanced, all these things, if the art evokes what it needs to and it looks good and it's not gross looking, and if the performance is good, right, like everything runs the way it's supposed to, there's not bugs, then I think that can be a perfect game. And there's a few games I've played that are like that.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely want to hear about some of those and why you would rate them as perfect. So Kyle, were you about to add something? I thought I heard you about to say something.
No, I'm just over here thinking, I guess, about really what can be classified as a perfect game based on what you guys are saying. Because I don't think a perfect game is necessarily flawless. Usually when we say perfect, everything about it, there's no errors in it. But I think there are perfect games, like Steve was kind of touching on, that have elements that people don't like. And maybe it's, that subjectivity within the group of people who think it's a perfect game. They all have their little nuances about it, because it is, at the end of the day, individual decisions made to make the game as a whole perfect. But, maybe there's, like you were saying about Telltale, there's moments that kind of take you out of the experience that you want from the game. But as a whole, there's so many opportunities for the experiences you do like within the game. And maybe there aren't games that offer that same experience that makes it, maybe due to scarcity, a perfect version of that game.
Yeah.
A lot of different contributing factors to what makes a game perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say that I think a game can be flawless, but that doesn't mean everyone likes it. So I think a perfect game isn't necessarily a game that everyone likes, but it's a game that, it, like Brad was saying, it does what it sets out to do flawlessly.
And it's interesting. I feel like there's this idea of flaws. Like, I think it's like when a game feels like, you ever heard somebody say like, oh, like we'll talk a little bit about game journalism at some point, or maybe you talk about it now. It doesn't really matter. But like, sometimes I've said this before, like you'll watch a review or read a review about a game, and the reviewer, the game journalist, is just bagging on the game. Like, oh, this aiming is weird, and the characters feel wonky, and da-da-da-da. And then they'll get to the end in their summary, and they'll be like, but this game does something that no other game has ever done. This game has made me blah, 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 blah. And I give this game a 9.5 out of 10. I give this game a really high rating. And I think, like, a perfect game to me is like a game that it sits with you in a way, like it evokes something. I don't even want to say it evokes a feeling like happy, crying, tears or something, but you walk away from it. Like, okay, another perfect game for me is Stardew Valley. Okay. Like, it's hard for me to like walk away from Stardew Valley and not feel like, okay, this one dude made this game, right? He's clearly an interesting character if you play the game, but the things that he does with it, like especially considering the time that we live in, right? With games with high fidelity, really interesting gameplay, really like awesome animations, incredible music, to make this game that feels almost like the bare minimum of what you need to make a game, like, but it feels exactly like what you want. Like right now, Shileen's playing Stardew, right? Like, and we've been playing Stardew together. And I've started the Stardew game on my Switch, and I've started a game on my PS5 or PS4, and I've played with my sister, and I played with Kyle, and I played with all these people, and the experience to me is like a miniature, like it's like gameplay first. Like it's like it takes away a lot of the fluff. Like, yeah, there's kind of a story, but the story doesn't really matter. Yeah, there's kind of characters that have like whatever, but it doesn't really matter. Yeah, there's like fishing mechanics, but it really doesn't matter. Because it's really the totality and the whole of the experience. And yeah, the game has some really, really annoying RNG, like most games. Yeah, like the time system where you have to go through a whole day sometimes can be very, like, brutal. But I think that, like, those imperfections kind of almost make it even more desirable. That flawed approach, you know what I'm saying?
I would even wonder, since we're talking about that, I even would go so far as to say that maybe feeling annoyed while you're playing is not indicative of an imperfection, right? Like, losing should be annoying.
That's a fair point.
That's a good point,
like there are such things as negative emotions. Like you don't get mad at a book when you read it and it makes you sad. Or if at a game, actually, when you play it and it makes you sad. Like some people don't want to be sad and they won't play those games, but that doesn't mean that being annoyed or frustrated, as long as it's like that's not what the game is, there's some. Well, actually, no. Even then, I think about that game, Getting Over It with Bennett Foddy. Yeah, that's a game that thrives on just murdering you with frustration, and people love it.
Yeah,
I don't know if people actually love it. I think it's really interesting to watch, and so it took off on Steam, not Steam, on streamings.
The game's a meme.
And so without that, I wonder how popular the game would be. But there's definitely a subset of people who like to be frustrated. I think they'll say, "Oh, I like getting over a challenge." No, I think you like to be frustrated because you spend most of that game not getting over the challenge.
Yeah,
that's a good point because I forgot which studio, or maybe it wasn't the studio, but just the community. But they've coined a term that they label on some games that's like, I think it's something around frustrating but fair or something along those lines. And one of the earliest games I heard it on was Donkey Kong Country, where a lot of people really loved the Donkey Kong Country games on the Super Nintendo, and those games were like frustratingly hard. And the minecart levels are infamous because it was impossible to do them on the first try. You couldn't react to things. You had to lose and memorize it.
You had to burn so many lives on those levels.
You did. Mm-hmm. And then people were torn because Tropical Freeze and these last couple of Donkey Kong Countries that came out were amazing games. Visually stunning. The platforming is incredibly tight. But they left so many of those, I guess, hallmarks of the original Donkey Kong Countries intact. Sorry for a little spoiler there. Brad, you know what I'm talking about. But because they left those hallmarks in there, people were torn, should we be allowing Nintendo to make frustratingly hard games out of Donkey Kong Country like they used to? Or should they be meeting us halfway now? Because we're in a new era. People play different games. People play games differently, arguably. I don't know what that really means. But
I think it's a pretty lame argument, specifically around Donkey Kong, because it's like, if that's what Donkey Kong always has been, why should Nintendo change the formula? And there's so many other games that are easy.
Yeah, and actually, I think in the long run,
there's not a lot of platformers actually, but there's not a lot of games that people can play to feel like they played Donkey Kong when they were kids.
True.
So, let Nintendo make the games that people want to play. Not everyone's going to play them, obviously. But
yeah, it's interesting because I think, like, the idea of, like, a really great game at all is always in context of the time that it's been created, right? Like, it's hard if you go back and play like the original Super Mario Brothers. Like it's it's an okay game now, right? Like if anything, you're not gonna play it for anything other than nostalgia, or if you're trying to speed run it, or if you've never played it and you just want to see what it's like. It's kind of like a historical thing. But like, I think if games try to invoke, quote unquote, the feeling that that game created a long time ago, they would be getting low ratings. And I think it's because like over time, like anything, any craft, if it's art or dance or sports or whatever, it evolves with the people who play it. And I understand like the Donkey Kong, like for example, one of my favorite games back in college was Mega Man, I think 9. And if you've ever played Mega Man is brutal, son. You were talking about how tough, like Donkey Kong.
I'm still mad about the 15 minutes I played at your house.
Yeah, it is brutal. I feel like if there's a game that I should do a stream of, it should be that game, because it's just like, it's so brutal, and it'll break your spirit. And so Mega Man 9, there's like this particular room, right? And you know, Mega Man, if you don't know about Mega Man, it's all about just shooting left, right, moving left, right, and like not touching obstacles, because you like will die instantly. And there's this one room where it was like a room where all of the walls were lined with spikes, insta kills, right? And
great.
But what happened was there was a platform in the middle of the room that was attached to the ceiling by a mechanism that allowed the platform to sway left to right, depending on your momentum, right? So it's kind of like a pendulum type thing. Now, like I said, all of the walls are lined with spikes, but directly under the platform is one little narrow slit that goes to the next room. That pathway, that slit down, is also lined with spikes.
So you need to like drop down like a pinball and avoid the spikes everywhere.
So you have to move the platform left and right and left and right and left and right, and perfectly time your jump so the platform's moving to one direction, and you can fall straight down between the middle of the slots and not get down the pathway and not get hit by spikes. Now, the first time I did it, that level, I did it perfectly. Like, I had made it through everything. There's stuff before it. And I got there. And on my first try, I dropped straight down. Right?
Hey.
And then I went on and I like got killed by the boss or something. So I had to come back around and do the whole level.
Oh, no.
Talk about 6 hours later.
Man.
That room became the bane of my existence. Like, the absolute bane. And I hated it, right? But also I loved it because of that's what the game is. But at the same time, I don't really want to play that now. Like, I really enjoyed that experience, but I honestly just am like, bro, I don't got it in me.
Why go through it again?
Like, exactly. And I feel like, though this is not a perfect illustration of what the newer era of games do, with like making easy modes and stuff like that, I just feel like there's some experiences that, in order, like, we're all growing up and we're older. Like, I cannot spend 6 hours in a room with spikes all over the walls just to make progress. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm done with the game, you know? So I feel like the gaming industry, to really be the more perfect game, has to like cater to me. You know what I'm saying?
That reminds me of a conversation. I might have brought it up before, but I have a friend who you may know. Actually, you probably don't know him. But, he once made the argument to me that this is a guy who I think he only plays games that are like decades old.
Okay.
I've played Smash Bros with him. I think we played Brawl together. Maybe we played Melee, like in the last couple of years, which isn't that surprising. People do still play Melee, but this guy is like has his whole room like set up with all these old consoles. I went to his house and he was like, check it out. He was playing Metal Slug. And I'm like,
oh, nice.
Dude. I mean, on one hand, like, nice, very cool. But on the other hand, I'm like, the newest game I've ever seen him play was Last of Us. And that was when it came out, to his credit. But I don't think he's played a new game.
Wow.
I don't know what he does.
Wow.
But so this guy made the argument that games, he said he doesn't believe that games age. He's like, what does it mean for a game to age well or not, or to not age well? And I'm like, well, you play an old game, and then compared to newer games, it either still holds up and it's still fun, or it doesn't. That's what it means. And he's like, but all games that haven't changed, like it's still just as fun as it was. And I just couldn't break that. I couldn't bridge that gap with him. I was like, no, it doesn't feel the same. Like,
Wow.
I don't play Donkey Kong Country like I used to, because as a kid, my mentality was just totally different. And the game industry is totally different. Like,
and I think there's a difference in, you kind of touched on this a little bit, Brad, the audience now, like having to cater to different people. Back then when they were making those games, maybe they had people who were gamers for a decade or two in some respect, but not in the way now. If someone's been playing games for 20 years,
yeah, true.
It's a completely different type of person who's been playing for 2 decades. Like the expectations are different. The types of games they've had access to are different, beyond fidelity, but just the improvements that games have made in controllers and in multiplayer, different styles of playing. There's all these different other variables that weren't really, like, so many games were just played with a singular joystick for a great portion of the people who played.
It ain't so.
Yeah. And maybe we'll revert to that one day because it was better. But no, I'm just kidding. So, it's just, it's a huge, like, there's so many, and there's things that you can't even, it's hard to just even account for some of these things that people are experiencing playing games nowadays, when there used to be just a small pool of the games that were available, and within that, a small variety of ways you could even play.
It's so interesting that you say that. I've never thought about that before. I've thought about the idea that we are all aging as gamers. So we have different expectations and time constraints and ability and so on and so forth. But I've never thought about it like, how does a person, like, think of a game. Okay, let's take like Horizon Zero Dawn, right? How does a person who's been playing games for 20 years of their life view Horizon Zero Dawn versus a person this might be their second or third game that they've ever played in their life, right? Maybe they're, like,
it's wildly different.
It's wildly different. So, like, to be able to create a game nowadays that can truly, like, capture a wide audience of, like, who's just starting to play and who's has I'll play, you guys know this experience. You'll play a game and you don't even necessarily need to know the controls. You don't necessarily need to know what the objectives are, but you can kind of just figure out the most optimal way. Like, for example, I complained like a episode or two ago, a podcast or two ago, about Spider-Man, right? And I was saying I was struggling with the combat, and it's so interesting. Like, I still struggle a little bit with the combat sometimes. I just get worked. But I haven't died many times, like maybe 3 or 4 times in the whole gameplay, right?
I actually have a thought about that if you want to talk about it later.
But it's interesting because, like, one of the mechanics that they introduced to you is swinging, right? Throughout the city, right? And when I first started playing, like, I kind of didn't pay attention to the controls. I just knew I hold R2 to swing. I press A to kind of jump at some point. I press circle or square or whatever to do my little dash. And then, I found out later that if I click down L3, I do a quick dive, right? And if I press R2 and L2 at the same time, I can, like, shoot to a certain point, right? And then jump off it. And at first, it's kind of like I'm not really super hardcore caring about the movement. I'm just trying to get through. I like Spider-Man. If the movement was even more janky, I'd probably still like it. But, bro, now I'm playing the game and it's like I'm on some other level. Like, I'm over here, like, just casually talking to Shailene, and I'm over here swinging, boom, doing the little jumping off points, doing little side flips because I got that move now. And then I'm like zipping. Like, there's a period of time where I was just above all of the buildings for like a solid minute, just finding a way to never like have to really swing, Yeah. And I feel like that comes from years and years and years of practice. So for me, how I view the swinging mechanic in the game and how I'd rate it is probably so different from somebody who's just like trying to acclimate, you know what I'm saying? Like with the game and how they would rate it,
Where's the X button?
Yeah.
So Keisha's been playing Super Mario Odyssey.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And she's been playing a little. I think she pretty much stopped in the last week, but she was fighting one of the first Brutals. And this is a boss where you essentially have to throw your hat at her and you knock her hat off, and then when she's stunned, you jump on her head.
Yeah.
And so when she stunned her, she didn't know what to do. She like kept throwing the hat at her, and even though the animation was clearly like the girl was like stunned, so she's not moving. She has little like woo 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 around her head.
Yeah, the star.
And then when she hits her with the hat, nothing happens. It just stays like that. And I'm like, you're supposed to jump on her head, because I just told her that because she's not gonna know otherwise. She doesn't play a lot of Mario where you jump on everything. So she does that, but she can't. I mean, she does succeed, but she had a lot of trouble consistently jumping on the head. She would jump over her head. She would jump in front, like jump and land in front of her. And I was like, it was frustrating to watch, honestly. I was like, just jump on her head. Because to her, the controls aren't intuitive. She's like, I have to think about what directions I'm pushing.
Yeah.
And she can't just automatically account for when you jump in the air in a video game, you have some control over the airspeed and you hold the button and do this or that. She couldn't do that. So she had to either, because she was always holding forward when she jumped, or she wasn't holding it enough, she couldn't like adjust on the fly. She had to either like get the positioning right,
from the initial
before she jumped at all, or just fail entirely. And so eventually she learned like to get the spacing right. And it was also funny because she had learned a few like trick throws with the hat. There was one throw where you just spin the hat and it goes around you in a spiral. And in a battle, that's not really like effective, but she kept doing it, trying to like hit these projectiles coming towards her with the spiral throw. And I'm like, just throw it, man. Just walk towards it and throw it. And so it was interesting that like without that intuition and without that experience, she didn't have the knowledge to know like this isn't really effective or the best way to go about this. She just kind of did what was flashy or what she remembered in the moment.
Man, yeah. And that just goes to show, like, because I remember playing Odyssey for the first time, and I'd played a bunch of platformers to that point, but it's something that we kind of take for granted if we've been playing games for a while. Is like expectations and game sense. And I don't know how you account for that either, because I think that's one of the things that might be the cause for why a lot of games, and still do, have lackluster tutorials, is because at this stage of the game, this far into the lineage of games being like part of just society, it's hard not to assume certain things about the players. Like they should know where this is, but like Brad said earlier, there's still people who are playing games for the first time, probably every day. It's got to be every day, because some people are, they're turning 3 years old, so they're not going to play a game until, so it has to be. So
one of my friends who will remain unnamed has a nephew, and he was low-key talking trash about his nephew because of the way the kid plays Pokemon. And he was like, yeah, he just spams attacks. He spams A and he skips all the conversations when he's talking to NPCs. He, I think it was something silly, like he catches he tries to catch every Pokemon, or, he just throws Pokeballs at Pokemon before they're weak. He doesn't understand the concept of like weakening a Pokemon before throwing a Pokeball at it. So he like uses all his Pokeballs up.
Man.
And he gets mad because it doesn't work. And he was like, yeah, this kid stinks at games. I'm like, I think he's just a kid.
Just a
I think they were all like that.
Like he fundamentally stinks at life.
Yeah.
This kid stinks at paying taxes. He's never done it in his life. But yeah, experiences are different.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because like that's why maybe I wonder. I mean, I am not like as deep into game like reviews and journalism as I used to be back in the day, but I know for sure, at least when I was into it, like you weren't a game journalist if you weren't somebody who was like deep into games, right? Like you loved them, you'd played a lot of them, and like you just wanted to be associated to games, but maybe you didn't think you would be a game developer, or you didn't want to make games, so you became a game journalist.
You were passionate about it.
Yeah, you're passionate.
Because it wasn't as lucrative back then as it is now.
Yeah, like now it's a legit thing, you know. Like Game Informer kind of set the pace. GameSpot, you know, I can name a few game trailers. So I think it's interesting because a lot of the reviews, like for example, let's take Elden Ring, right? Elden Ring got 10 out of 10, 10 out of 10, 10 out of 10. Everybody. And as you guys know, I was a bit skeptical about that, right? Because I'm like, what's the chances that this game is really a 10 out of 10 by everybody? Now, it might be
perfect game.
It might be a perfect game. I haven't played it. But that's just me in general because I've played enough games. Like, for example, I say this all the time, but Skyward Sword was rated a 10 out of 10. And there's no way. I just can't objectively feel, and I love Zelda. I really do. I cannot objectively give that game a 10 out of 10. It has to be like biased, or you're doing a time crunch. So all the terrible things about the game, you know, trying to get the review out, they don't feel terrible because you don't have, you know, it's a different perspective. But anyway, I say that to say like these people who are doing game journalism are people who are probably like us, played games for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, you know, 5+ years. But I have a feeling that their reviews don't reflect like the lower end of the spectrum, right? Like I feel that when I was a kid, the reviews kind of felt like they still matched me because even if you were a little bit older than me, maybe you're 20, 25, even 30, you'd probably only been playing games for as long as me. You know what I'm saying? Like I started with the Nintendo, you know, I was 4, you know, and I was trash. I was that, you know, whoever that is nephew, you know, but I pretty much like it's almost like a second language to me. You can give me a control and I won't look at it. If they tell me to do something on the screen, I don't have to look down at the controller. It's like a part of me, right? Like from the Xbox to, but anyway, my point is like I feel like there's probably
everything except ZL and ZR.
ZL and ZR.
Oh my god! Please,
that's not even
worst buttons in any modern controller.
You know,
absolutely.
But really, my point is that like I feel like game journalism is kind of becoming that thing like. Oh, it's kind of like movie critics, where movie critics like review movies differently than the audience that watches them. Like they'll be like this, like Adam Sandler movies always get a 1 out of 10, a 2 out of 10, right? But Adam Sandler movies stay making buku bucks.
All the money.
People, and they're smartly written. They're funny.
Yeah. So it's like a disconnect now from the ratings and like the people who actually are like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, because the angle you take it when you're a critic versus a consumer, I think is fundamentally different in a lot of cases. And so people who make the transition from consumer to critic are probably the closest you'll get. And so I think, you know, back in the day when critics had to be gamers.
Yeah.
You know, then that's why reviews felt more genuine. But now, you know, the best writers are the critics, the ones who could make the most, you know, for lack of a better way of saying it, clickbaity articles.
Yeah,
are the reviewers because they bring in revenue versus actually get a useful documentation of the material out there, because that seems to be secondary in most cases now. And so you have to, but I think it's also creates like job security for people on YouTube who do genuine reviews or people who have their own blogs that you can trust because they played the game for more than 2 hours. You know, Steam looking at you because you got 2 hours on my mind right now. But, you know, what's the limitations or like what's the criteria for somebody to even be, you know, a useful critic aside from biases, because everybody has their biases, but to somebody who we can trust to objectively look at a game and give it, you know, a score that's meaningful and a review that'll help you make a purchase or, you know, just know if the game is good. Like, why is that, you know?
Here's a few thoughts. First, I will say that I think scoring, I've already made this clear in general, but I think scoring games or movies or anime or whatever is stupid. I think putting a number on it is at best meaningless and at worst misleading. I think there's better ways to communicate whether a game is good or not. Anyway, so it seems like we're discussing that. In my head, it seems like there's I think two axes that we should consider for games journalists, right? And one we just talked about, which is like the experience and expectations of a real gamer, like someone who sits to play games to have fun, or for whatever reason someone plays games.
Mm-hmm.
On the other, on one end of this scale, on the other end of the scale would be a critic, a professional critic who plays games to make a buck, reviews them for a buck. And it reminds me of, have you guys seen Watchmen? I know you've read it, Brad.
Watchmen the movie? Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah. So in that graphic novel, Dr. Manhattan is this human who essentially becomes God. And what happens to him is that his perception completely changes. He's able to see like his entire he experiences all of time simultaneously. So for him, everything is the present. And he already knows everything he's going to know and everything he used to know. He's experiencing it all at once. And so he also like loses his I think ability to empathize with humans because he sees the vastness of the universe and the tininess of the universe, and he's like, oh, human life is meaningless. Yeah. And so over time throughout the story, he becomes less and less like attached to humanity, and it really makes him suffer as much as someone like him can suffer. And I wonder if that's kind of what it is like for game journalists, where it's like you have to play so many games and you have to play them so quickly that like that's the problem, is that their experience is totally detached from the human experience, the human gamer experience.
Yeah.
And I wonder, like, even if someone who loves games, right, like someone who grew up playing games, like if we became game journalists, I wonder if we too would become apathetic, Dr. Manhattan lookalikes as we slowly lose. I mean, think about Yahtzee, who does zero punctuation.
Oh, man.
I commend him because it really feels like he still loves games, but he blows through them so quickly. And I wonder if he has time to really enjoy the games.
Yeah. And
I wonder how long he'll last before he kind of becomes like desensitized towards the things. He has an eye for like game mechanics and stuff, so maybe not. But
yeah, I think that's yeah. Go ahead, continue.
On the other hand, I kind of feel like he maybe has gone too far. Like he only focuses on games mechanics and flaws, and then people who are maybe just more casual players and just want to have fun, he says, "Oh, this game sucks," but they're like, "I had a great time." So he's kind of, has that problem in a different way.
It's interesting because like Yahtzee, for example, who's been around forever, man. This guy is like the jump. I would say he's a game reviewer. And yes, I think he's a journalist by nature, but I think that he is fundamentally just like, I play games and I give you my personal opinion on it. And I give you what I think is hilariously bad. And, he's witty and he's very good at what he does. And then there's what I would say like game journalists who do game reviews. And I feel like game journalists who do game reviews are truly the Dr. Manhattans. Like, because they have to kind of, I don't know if they have to, but they do look at things kind of as in like a third person. Like, it's kind of like people who work in the news, right? 18 people were murdered today. Like, you can't.
Yeah, who can just say that?
You can't just say that. Like, unless you've removed yourself from it. Like, you're different. You're not. This is just news. This is information. More people have died today. And I definitely agree with that. And I think, it's interesting because I think as the craft goes on longer, it has to have a higher standard, right? Or it creates a higher standard or whatever. And I think in the industry, the standard is getting higher and higher for game journalism as far as like, well, I don't know about that. But I'll say that the standard is different than it was back in the day. Because yes, there's the clickbaity, nothing at like Dexerto, but like I'll read some of their articles and I'm like, I don't know if I can, like, I like some of what they talk about, but a lot of it is just like pure garbage. But like they created like, for example, let's take Game Informer because I think they're a good example. Like, I've listened to a lot of their podcasts. I've watched a lot of their videos. And something that they've made very clear for years is that how they assign game reviews is based on what somebody's expertise is, right? So, for example, there's a guy named Matthew Cotto, right? He does all sports games because he's a sports games guy, right? Which is good because it gives him insight because he knows what sports games are. He knows NHL and MLB and NBA, right? And he's a sports person. So he kind of can speak to the avid sports fan, but he can't really speak to the average person who's just like, oh, should I check this game out in general? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Right.
And then and then I know every company has a Dark Souls dude now. Dark Souls gal.
pretty
You know what I'm saying? Like somebody who's all about that FromSoft life. And I feel like
they were getting burned.
Yeah, like it's just like it's because it's kind of its own game mechanic or genre almost. Like, and people love it so much. I just feel like people who review if you're in a certain space, you're kind of tainted because you can't look at it completely like from the outside perspective. You know, it's.
That's actually the second thing I was going to say. The second axis was like your niche. So I feel like everyone has games that they like, and I was going to say that people, journalists especially, should just stick to the games that they know well, and they should stick to the games that they like, or maybe not that they like, but yeah, that something that they're experienced with. And no, that's not exactly what I was going to say. What was I going to say? Oh, I was going to say you should as consumers, we should follow the journalists that we trust for a given genre. So like maybe Yahtzee. Let's not talk about Yahtzee. So Arlo's a YouTuber, and he's really big into Nintendo games. He loves Pikmin. He loves Metroid. He loves what just came out. Metroid just came out.
He plays
he loves Pokemon.
Games, yeah.
He's the kind of guy who like he's willing to get super hype about something, but he's also willing to call out Nintendo. And so I feel personally that when it comes to Nintendo games, I'm willing to maybe not trust his judgment entirely, but at least to listen to his input and see what he thinks about something.
Yeah.
And so like he's my Nintendo guy, right?
Yeah.
But I wouldn't necessarily go to him for reviews on
sports games.
Sports games, exactly. Although, interestingly enough, he just released a review of Elden Ring, and he says that he loves it. So that's for me that's exciting because I'm like what you just said. He's more of an outsider when it comes to Souls-like games. His first Souls-like game was one of the Dark Souls that came out on Switch. And he said he liked it, but now he's playing Elden Ring, and he's like, this is bananas. I love it.
Yeah.
Bananas.
So,
yeah.
That's cool. I think we should have a guy that we trust for genres, and then we should have a guy that we trust for not genres, for outside the genre.
So, one thing that I find hard to, I guess, kind of deal with guys on the scale like Arlo, where they have this expectation, I guess, being an authority in this space, just because what little I know about how these partnerships work between these game reviewers and getting review copies and all the hurdles they have to go through with the publishers. With the guys who do before you play, they kind of hit me in a bad way. Or before you buy,
they had try before you buy, and they have the thumbnail where they always have dude with his hands outstretched, and they just replace the face with whatever character.
Yeah, I think I want to say it was
Game Ranks.
It might be Game Ranks.
I think it might be Game
They
Ranks.
do that show at least too. That's them. But it might have been before. But what really got me was their review of Cyberpunk. It was because the real reviews were out at the same time their review hit, and so it was definitely that scramble of who can get theirs out first.
Yeah.
Who can make the best headline to rise to the top, all those different things. And they were one of the channels that I would watch frequently, not a lot, but their review for Cyberpunk, if I remember it correctly, was mostly positive. in the wake of Cyberpunk just demolishing expectations. Yeah, completely bombing.
I did just check. It is GameRanks that does that.
Yeah. And I've had this experience with a couple of different YouTubers where, it's almost like they signed some sort of agreement that they wouldn't say anything bad about the game or anything negative at all. And for me, I don't go to journalists, exclusively or anything, but I think there's like a level of trust that I just can't seem to maintain with the people who seem to be too close to releases and too close to the publishers. And so lately I've been sticking with the people who post a review 4 or 5 a week after, like Skill Up or somebody who actually plays it and reviews at the same time, Corey Kenshin, people in that vein where they have no affiliation. They're not part of the hype train. They play the game for hours and then give you their honest take.
And that's actually.
I know you weren't attacking Arlo specifically, but I will say that Arlo is one of those guys. He's usually complaining about games because he has such high standards for Nintendo games. Yeah, he's definitely not in their pocket.
I forgot to circle back on Arlo. Yeah, and so the reason why I couldn't watch Arlo because I agree. Yeah, he spends a good bit of time, and his videos are long and they show a lot of in-depth stuff. But he is a bit. Just from what I like to watch, he is too much of a Nintendo fanboy for me to, be able to relate a lot of the time. Because he'll forgive things that I'm just like, yeah, your bias is getting kind of in the way.
You are the
But he tells you when he tells you when he's forgiving things. Like if he complains about something that I also could complain about, and then he's like, oh, but it's fine. I'm giving this game a 10 out of 10. Like. That's fine with me. I don't need to give the game a 10 out of 10. I see that the element that I would complain about is there, so I have been informed,
So
I don't necessarily care about his end rating.
So I want to actually what you guys are talking about right now about trusted reviewers. I want to come back to this because I think it's interesting how it affects how you understand reviews. But I did want to talk about what you just mentioned, Kyle, about how. So I was going to say this earlier because I think Steve was saying something, but like, it's like remembering that like game journalism is kind of subject to the game development industry as a whole, particularly like marketing and like publishing side, right? Because in order for you to get an early copy for review that comes out on day one, you have to have a positive relationship with somebody at X company, right? Like if it's Nintendo or Sony or whatever. And it has been well known in the past that some companies make you sign documents that say you cannot talk about this aspect of the game. You cannot talk about this aspect of the game. And you can't, they won't outright say you can't give it a bad rating, but they have created certain mechanisms that say, hey, let's say, for example, it's a Metal Gear game. I don't think they've done this, but say it's Metal Gear. Big game that everybody wants to play. If the Kojima was like, yo, you're not allowed to talk about this, or that, and this. Are you going to go against him? You're going to go, okay, I won't because I want to, as a game journalist, because this is how I make my money, drop this day one so I get all the clicks and the views.
You got to comply.
Exactly. So it's kind of like, there's these blinders that come from an industry that is fundamentally financially attached to the other industry, right? Like it's not like unbiased.
It's symbiotic.
Yeah, symbiotic. And YouTubers like Corey Kenshin and, the different people who are very popular from time to time, I have noticed, for example, I like Corey Kenshin a lot. And he recently did a review. He recently did a kind of playthrough of which Far Cry just came out? 6? Like I can't even remember. It's like 12 now. And the thing is, he's playing Far Cry 6 and he's being Corey Kenshin. He's just making fun of it and goofing off. But he was very clear that he was kind of sponsored by Far Cry, right? So if you're a viewer of him, you got to go, okay, if he's being sponsored by them, he's not going to badmouth them too much. He might joke off and, be Corey Kenshin, but like, they're also cutting him a paycheck. You know what I'm saying? Like, there
They
is,
get paid.
you know what I'm saying? Like you work for a company, you can't really, and I feel like that's the problem I have with game journalisms. And I kind of like what you said, Kyle, where you kind of wait until like somebody releases their review or their opinion like weeks later or days later, because that person is playing it at their own kind of discretion. And it's unlikely that some company's going to pay them to release it late, because guess what, if your game is garbage, you want people to get as many positive reviews out early before people realize your game is garbage and they can't return because Steam said it's 2 hours and it took them 2 hours to go through the tutorial.
Right. And those the refund waves and stuff, they want to avoid that.
Yeah, exactly.
It seems like they the meta for us as consumers, and I hope you're all listening, Super Agile Nation, is not to patronize reviewers who use day one, or who get pre copies, basically, because we're incentivizing that part of the industry. Like, you should rely on the reviewers who buy the game with their own money, and they play it on their own terms and they review it on their own terms. So give them clicks, and don't give the other ones clicks. Make it, vote with your clicks, basically.
Vote with your clicks. It's funny because, like, if you think about how many games have day one patches, right? Like almost all of them. So it's kind of like, how do you even like give an accurate review of a game that on day one is dropping a patch to fix a whole bunch of stuff or add content? It's like, I feel like it's I don't know, and maybe game journalism can't survive without the day one drops of reviews. You know what I'm saying? Like maybe it would thin the herd, and maybe that would be a good thing, right? Get rid of the hacks in the industry, and those who are actually
the journalists or the developers.
The journalists, like the journalists who only thrive on access. You know what I'm saying? Like, they have access, and that's their benefit. Like, that's the only thing they give. They don't have actual like good value outside of their access, like
because that's a huge thing in this information age, is like leaks and spoilers. And so, like, to me, an early review copy is like the next best thing. If you're the first person to have a copy and can share an image or footage of something, then that is, and that's how you can provide value. Then even if your quote unquote reviews and everything else you're doing is like damaging the industry, you'll thrive, like you're saying, because of that access. And so I don't know what it would take to kind of make it to where, like, just visual, having the advantage of just being able to show it to someone, I guess, can be taken out of the equation.
Yeah, it's hard to say, because I do think, like, in journalism in general, being the first person to, be on a particular story is important. Like, I don't know if it's important, but at least it matters, because you set the standard, or you're the person who everybody reads because you give the most up to date, oh, this is what's happening, this is what's going on. And I feel like game journalism falls into that same problem of, hey, like, we have the first take, and oh, look, on my Twitter account, we have the first image of the box art, or who's the first person to break the news? Because if you think about Twitter, like, it's the person who says it first who seems to get the most retweets and likes and all this stuff, gets the amplified message. So I feel like, it's it's an incentive to a journalist to, like, I'll do what you tell me, publisher, for the benefit of, clicks and all that jazz,
Comment first on YouTube videos.
Yeah. So one thing I did want to say is ask you guys, because it's interesting here you guys talk about Arlo, because I'm not familiar with him. So how do you guys, like, choose who you go to like listen to for reviews, for example? Like, is it based on their content, or is it based on, like, okay, I'll just speak on me first. Like, for example, like, I don't, like, I like Omni, right? You guys heard me talk about Omni a lot, right? He's a
Mhm.
YouTuber. He's not really a reviewer of anything. He's just like a commentator, right? But I do
Yeah.
like
Daily news
kind of guy, and he's normally like he's on the Twitters, and he follows all the stuff, and he knows all the internet lingo and stuff going on that I can't keep up with.
He's like a toned down Joe Rogan
Oh.
in terms of like terms of the variety of content.
Yeah. He's a lot like like radio DJs who would also tell you what's going on in the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. But he sticks with mostly like internet culture.
Yeah, he's like internet.
Mm-hmm.
He's internet culture, and I'm an internet person who just doesn't have time to do all that stuff, right? So he's a good place to go to get. Oh, this is all what's happening. Oh, Corey Kenshin did this. Oh, Jake Paul said this. Did it? Like all that stuff, right? And I will listen to his opinions on games a little bit, just because I know that he kind of has a similar. He likes games that I like. You know what I'm saying? Like, so if he likes something, there's a chance that I'll like it. You know what I'm saying? So it's not really about him being a journalist or him having a good critique. It's that
you like his taste.
Exactly, his tastes are similar to mine, and
that's what I was trying to say earlier.
Yeah,
that's a great point. I think that definitely does matter because I mean, I think that's the whole reason why you would want to have, on top of I guess having people who have expertise in areas, like maybe somebody's good at a game, but that isn't their preference. You wouldn't necessarily want that person's review either, because I mean they could tell you, oh yeah, as far as the game mechanics, I play games like this, I'm good at them. This one's hard, so that means it's a good one because it'll challenge you because it's supposed to be a challenging game. That maybe that's a positive side of the review. Maybe that's information that's good for someone, but I guess if you're looking for a well-rounded review, you wouldn't want an individual like that. And so to find someone who has the same interests as you, I think that goes a little bit deeper because they'll probably highlight the same things that you'll gravitate to if you did play the game yourself.
That's what I meant earlier, is having someone that you like for a genre. I guess I really should have been saying for taste. Right?
Yeah.
I know Arlo likes a lot of the games that I like. He I don't think I like Paper Mario as much as he does. I never played Paper Mario, but like it seems pretty cool.
They're good.
I think if I had to play, I would certainly enjoy it. It's just not top of my list. He loves Pikmin. I used to love Pikmin. He gets ultra hype about Metroid. I love getting hype about Metroid.
Hey.
So I mean, for me, that's why I care about what he says. And to answer your question, Brad, how I pick people is basically what'll happen is I'll be looking up reviews for a game that I like or that I'm curious about, and I'll see reviewers, and I think I gravitate towards what feels like personal channels, so like not game ranks, who do a ton, not like review, not channels that do a lot of like not journalists, basically. Things that feel personal, like, oh, this is just me and my review. So I gravitate towards them, and if they're reviewing games that I'm already interested in, and I like that the way the review went, and I feel like, oh, this was well thought out, blah blah blah, then I will keep going back to that person. Yeah. For later games.
What? The only downside of like following people who you like have similar taste with is that if that person is not I guess you could say like an open-minded person, you may not experience games that you might like that person doesn't, so if a person is like, oh, I'm a Nintendo person only, like maybe there's a game that Arlo would really, really like on, the Xbox or the PlayStation that since you follow him, you never get to see, and the benefit of...
Sure, you have to have a variety.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the benefit of broader gaming journalism is that there is a like wider berth of content. So, in Game Informer, when I was younger, I'd read the magazines cover to cover, right? And I'd literally read everything. And I think that taught me, how to like see other games that might not be a game that I'm interested in. Like, oh, it's some kind of weird sim game, or oh, it's some kind of weird sport game. You know, like something that I like sport games, I guess back then. But like, I'd be like, oh, this is interesting. This might have something that I like. Let me check it out. Let me rent it at Blockbuster. Oh, Blockbuster. But, I feel like that's something that I feel just like in general, how the internet is that it's like a lot of echo chambers. So you don't really, like there's people who like hate certain games just because it's cool to hate it. And they've never actually really played it, but they'll never play it because they hate it. It's like, what are you talking about? Like, that doesn't even make any sense. Like,
I mean, yeah, that's a concern. But I mean, there's so many games.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I feel like
it's too many.
Even if I said I'm only ever going to play 2D platformers for the rest of my life, I would still have too many games to play.
Yes. You'd never play them all.
Yeah. So I'm like, that is a concern, but I'm also not that concerned about it. Plus, I have friends. I have people that have different tastes than me, and they kind of fill those blanks. I try to follow a variety of sources for learning about new games. So I mean, you just have to be cognizant of those biases and those tunnel vision scenarios.
And what you just said just made me think of something, Steve. Is because I'm in a similar boat. I have a very large like backlog of games that I've received somehow or got because I wanted to play them somehow. Yeah, just
they found them in my backpack after school one day.
I just happened to be in Target, and then all of a sudden I had 10 games in my bag. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, don't ask. And you could have one if you play your cards right. But
you can't play your cards because I have them in my backpack.
Is this your card? But what was that? So I think one of you guys said it. I don't know when or where or if ever
or why.
But it was something along the lines of if you're playing games that you want to play and you're enjoying yourself, like even if you're not staying up with the trends, you're not playing the most, like the newest games, then that's like what matters. And so like to bog yourself down mentally by looking at your backlog and saying, I'm never going to get to this game. I'm never going to finish that game. But you're enjoying the game you're playing. It kind of does yourself a disservice as far as enjoying the experience you're having. And to kind of backtrack a bit, this might be where your friend is at as far as like playing these old school games. Yeah. I agree that, broadening your horizons could be a beneficial thing. But at the same time, I guess the other side of that coin is to play games for the sake of playing games because other people are playing them versus playing the ones you enjoy playing doesn't make a whole lot of sense either.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes and no.
Ooh, let's hear it.
So here's my experience, right? I pretty much only did that for years. Like I didn't care what anyone else was playing. I just did my own stuff.
Now look at you.
I only played single player games. What I've realized is that, at least for me, it is really fun to co-experience things, right? I think some of it is FOMO. Mm-hmm. Where like, oh, this game looks so cool. All my friends are playing it and they love it. Oh, I wish I could play it too. But I think maybe related to that, but not exactly the same, is just the fact that like, it's cool to sit here and talk about, like, we talked about Hades in the past. And as much as I love gushing about a game that I've played and being like, oh, like, here's all the things I like about it, blah, blah, blah. It's even more fun when one of my friends actually picks it up and plays it afterwards. And then we can keep talking about it. Like, oh, this happened and this happened. And we can be like, it's a way to connect with people for me. I was just posting on Facebook earlier today, like, I love sharing music with people. And God, I hope this never turns into a music podcast. Honestly, please. I know you've never mentioned it, but I just want to go ahead and put that out there. I don't want that.
Oh, well, surprise. Guess what the next episode?
It's going to be we're going to become Pitchfork. But, no, yeah, I was just saying on Facebook, like, I love sharing music with people that appreciate it. And then later they're like, oh, I listened to that album. It was sick. How's this album? You like this? So I do think you should play what you want to play. And if that's enough for you, like, more power to you. Sometimes that's how I feel. But I also like a lot of the issues is like, man, Elden Ring looks great. All my friends are playing it now, but I don't have time to play it. I would rather be playing something else.
That's real.
So I mean,
yeah, I think it's like it's a very human thing, right? Like there's definitely
I want to share things.
there's definitely the FOMO, like you said, but I think really more importantly, it's the shared experience. Like we're all going to be kind of playing God of War in the next, coming weeks to like month, right? And though it's like a really old game per se, like it's new to us, right? Like I beat it recently and you guys haven't really played it. And all of the experiences are fresh and new. And when you play a game kind of in a vacuum, all those experiences that, oh man, that experience was really cool, or that really happened, not that they die, but they have nowhere to go, right? And it's really fun to be playing a game. Like if I was playing Chimera Land, like it's a multiplayer game, right? But if I was playing Chimera Land by myself, and then I told Kyle about it, and then Kyle played it later, like it would be a cool experience, but it's another thing for us to be playing Chimera Land at the same time, even if we're not playing together, because it's like an experience. It's very like deep inside. It's like being a kid again. Like I remember going to school, I was playing Zelda, and I'd be like, yo, son, I just got to that part where this, and my friend's like, yo, that part is so hard. Did you see when this happened? And we're like in the moment together. But like if I played a year later, like, oh, did you guys play that? Oh, yeah, we already played that. It's not something you want to talk about because it's like the past. And I feel like that's an important part of gaming too. And you just got to find, if that's means playing with everybody on the world at the same time, then do it. But if that means playing with your group of friends, do it too. Play that game, play with them,
I think one of the things that maybe, the way they used to capture that with older games is leaderboards. Because if you didn't have someone you talked to directly, you still weren't playing games in vacuums when in like old arcades. Like if you saw the same 3 letters at the top of the leaderboard on every game in there, that said something to you about like this person. First off, they don't have a job. But secondly, they're bad to the bone. And like you create this narrative within it and you're part of their story. Maybe, you could have some power struggle. Maybe you meet them someday, or maybe not. Maybe your group of friends are just like, oh, I wonder who that person is, And so I agree that playing in a vacuum, even just a little bit of some sort of way, because a lot of older games on old consoles, there's no interactivity with anyone. But if you could somehow have some sort of community around the games you're playing, it definitely does enrich in the experience, no matter how small.
Something that Steve just said like really hit home is like he really wants to play Elden Ring, but he just doesn't have the time. And even if he has the time, quote unquote, there's other games that he might be actively playing or actively interested in. So Elden Ring has to take a back seat, right? And I think
priority.
Yeah, it's not a priority. And I think, maybe that's like the curse of being an adult gamer. But I think it's also just the real reality is that there's just too many games, like you guys were saying earlier. Like there's just way too many, and it's just obscene. Like back in the day, like honestly, there was only a few games. Like you could look, I remember looking in Game Informer, and you could see the games that were coming out on their little calendar in the magazine. And it would just be a little square, and it would say, this game's coming out, this game's coming out. And you would literally know every game that was coming out in a month. Maybe there's some game that, you wouldn't know, but it's like rare. And nowadays, it's impossible. Like Steam gets like, I don't know how many hundreds of games a day, and they all vary in quality. They might actually, like 50% of them might be good, but you just don't know. There's just no way. And it's like, a score doesn't even help me, right? Because it doesn't even give me information like, oh, this game is fun to the one dude who reviews this type of game in this place. Like, awesome. But why should I stop what I'm doing right now to play this particular game? You know what I'm saying? Like, it might be the quote unquote perfect game, but is this the quote unquote perfect moment for me? Because it's like 500, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly the issue for me is I'm trying to play other things,
and I don't know what the solution is.
there is one other issue that maybe we should move on to, and that is performance.
Performance? What do you mean?
Right? So
Elaborate.
this is something I wanted to bring up when you mentioned the topic. So Elden Ring got like perfect 10 out of 10s across the board. Everyone loves it. And not just the critics, but also a lot of like the user reviews on things like Metacritic. Like everyone loves the game. But something that's come up, at least in my world recently, is that the game has major performance issues. Well, maybe not major. I guess it depends on who you talk to. It has noticeable performance issues on most of, if not all, of the platforms that it's currently released on.
It's pretty
and a lot of people, and a lot of people are wondering, like, okay, so these reviewers, these journalists came in and gave this game a 10 out of 10. Why didn't they mention the fact that, like,
that's what I've been trying to figure out.
And for a game like Elden Ring, which a lot of games are like this, but Elden Ring is one of them. You really want it to be stable. Yes. Maybe you don't need 60 frames per second, although it'd be really great. But it's an action game that relies on like precise timing, and not necessarily quick reactions, but at least precise timing and precise reactions. You can't be dropping controller inputs and like stuttering and having sloppy frame rates. You gotta clean that crap up.
Yeah.
So why did anyone mention it?
That is a great question.
I honestly, this is where, I mean, maybe I put my tinfoil hat on, but it honestly just feels like it benefited reviewers to give it a high grade and not complain about it, because it's almost like feeding into its own hype. For what was it, 2 years in a row? Elden Ring was the most anticipated game of the year or whatever at the Game Awards. And I feel like as a journalist, and I feel like, yes, I think people like the game, but I think it's like, why even mention this? Like, if we say something negative, we're going to get hate from people who have never played the game because they're so hype about this thing, and you know how the internet is. So it's like, let's not talk about it. Let's just talk about the good stuff, and let's rate it how we would rate it if, I don't even want to say appease the people, but to make an easy win from a journalistic standpoint. I think that's what happened. A happy story. And there's nothing wrong with the happy story. But yeah, it's super, like number one, did nobody play it on PC? Like no journalist? Because I just all the things I've seen on the PC side is like, okay, like somebody had to be like, okay, this is significant enough. Like any other game, if they released a new James Bond game and it was dropping frame rates and every time a new item loaded into the world, it dropped frames, they would knock the score for that, no matter how good the James Bond game was, because it's just not, I just feel like there's some like dirty pool. And then like I was talking about Omni, and I shared it in the Super Agile Bros Discord just not too long ago. He was playing for 5 hours on the PlayStation, right? There's apparently supposed to be autosave, or maybe there isn't, or there's some kind of glitch. Something
he thought there was autosave.
I mean, there's supposed to be autosave from what apparently it's a glitch or something, and you have to quit the game like manually in order for it to save, right? And his power got turned off or something. Like, I'm assuming he has a cat or something. I feel like it was his cat, but he didn't want to say it. Or he tripped or something. But he lost 5 hours of gameplay progress in an instance. And then this little menu popped up at the very beginning of the game when he reloaded his game that said, make sure to quit to the menu, otherwise it might not save. And it feels like the type of thing that they saw it was a bug, and they were like, yo, we can't fix this right now. We need to get this out the door. Put this little dialogue, because this takes 5 seconds. Do it at the very beginning of the game where it won't affect any code. And like most people are just going to skip through that and not notice it. And this man lost 5 hours of his life.
Moments like this, they're like, well, it's in there. It's at the beginning of the game. Yeah.
I'm like, how did hundreds and hundreds of journalists, nobody go, oh yeah, I lost some progress and the game is a little glitchy here and the frame rates and like, it just seems like I don't know, man.
So what I think may have happened is kind of going in line with your idea. You know, no journalist wanted to be that, that 10th dentist that doesn't approve the toothpaste. But another thing that they do is, I know they did this for Cyberpunk. The reviews were like, not sterilized, but there was a certain conditions that they had to meet to play the game. Like their PC had to be at a certain level and they could only review it on PC. So I'm thinking that maybe, because I haven't heard anything otherwise, people haven't just been weren't playing it on their own console. They couldn't have been, like you're saying, they couldn't have been before the reviews. Maybe they went somewhere or received a version of the game that did run perfectly.
Oh, a review copy.
Yeah.
A review copy.
And so to them, they had the game that everybody else wanted and reviewed that.
That's another reason you can't trust the early review copies, because who knows what version you get. That's why I love, unrelated to video games, I think it's Gamers Nexus. They do like PC parts and hardware and stuff. And I'm pretty sure that they order, they order all their parts, but they've specifically had situations where they have to interact with a distributor or, whatever, the OEM, the people who create this hardware, and they don't tell them who they are because they don't want special treatment. And then only if like things have to get escalated, they're like, "Don't you know who I am?" And then they embarrass them because like, it took you this long to fix this issue. I think Newegg got caught doing something by Gamers Nexus because, they were giving them the runaround, and they were like, "Actually, we're Gamers Nexus," and suddenly everything worked.
Wow.
Anyway.
Yeah, it's like you need like a blind, like you can't. Yeah. It definitely, like, that review copy thing does bother me because, like you said, because like if you have a controlled audience, right? Say there are 1,000 reviewers, like let's even make it 10,000. If you say to them, "Hey, we're gonna send you an early review copy. You have to play it on a PlayStation 5, and we ask that you just remember," and like they even add a note, "Remember to, when you quit the game, to save." People sometimes forget to do that, right? Those little like just dropping that little thing in the pool can completely like negate any problems that the millions of people might encounter who have different, SKUs of PlayStation 5, different setups, and and it's like, once again, like, what do you call it? Tipping the scale, right, to your favor. And I don't know, like, not that I've lost trust in FromSoft, but I just don't know what's going on with that. Like, this is just very strange to me. Like,
I'm not that hurt about it. I think it's a normal thing. I think that, I don't know, they dropped a few balls for sure. I'm not giving them a pass, but I don't feel as hurt and embarrassed on their behalf as I do for like maybe CD Projekt Red, who really not just dropped the ball, but I would say even actively misled people.
Yes.
I think FromSoft is just
playing the game.
They're just trying to make it work.
But go ahead.
Silent. I was just saying, I guess one of the differences, I guess, the CD Projekt Red did is that they were vocal and they like lied to everyone's face. While FromSoft, I guess, at least from where I am, they've been relatively silent aside from, dropping trailers and building the hype. And even after, I guess, these negative reviews, I haven't seen anything that says that they've commented or, said that they were aware of anything, that they are going to fix anything. So sometimes, the silence kind of works in their favor as far as, I guess, getting even more of a pass in a way. It's like they're not actively betraying us, so...
I mean, they don't have to lie. They have the most anticipated game 2 years in a row. Why say anything? Like right. Logically, just release the game. It don't say anything. Just don't talk about it. Just release a trailer here or there. Like CD Projekt Red or whoever, any other game company, they got to drum up. No Man's Sky, right? You got to drum it up to get people to purchase it because the hype train. But they just had the hype train on accident. Just because, of course, on their past performance.
It's them.
They are,
on the pedigree.
on their pedigree. But the only reason why I don't let these things pass is because it's just like what happened with day one updates. We let one of the bigger games, like this is a long time ago. I remember there's a controversy about a game doing a day one update and everybody being like, oh, but this company's cool and it's all good. The game is still great. You just need to have internet connection, which was expected anyway. It's all good. And all of a sudden it's the rule, not the exception. Yeah. And it's like, once the rest of the industry is watching, they're paying attention. It's like, oh, if you don't say anything, if you already have a positive, just drop it. And then, not that it will necessarily happen. I just feel like you got to have accountability, in some capacity,
I will say that everyone I know who's playing the game loves it, So even if the reviewers didn't feel the need to say something, maybe it's because, I think that decision is also being reflected in the reviews I get from my friends who are like, yeah, it is a mess a little bit, but I fixed it enough. Or, yeah, it's a mess, but I don't care. I love it so much. I'm going to keep playing. Mm-hmm. And these are not, easy people to please necessarily. Huh. So I do hope that they fix the issues. It's not, when I said earlier that this was an issue that I wasn't going to get it because of the performance, I was kind of exaggerating. There's other reasons I'm not going to get it for now. I do want to get it someday, but people like it. So that's part of why I'm more comfortable giving them this pass this time. And I think that what happened to CD Projekt Red was enough of a warning to the rest of the industry.
Everyone.
That, everyone's watching and they got rocked. But
they did.
So I think that was a good thing.
People are always doing that, right? What was the game before that? It was Steve. I'm not going to say the person's name, but it was a friend of ours who pre-ordered a game that what game is that? You know what I'm talking about.
No. I don't know the story. I just heard pre-order.
They pre-ordered a game, and it was you know who
I do know you're talking about. I do know who you're talking about.
I'm trying to remember the game. It was Anthem.
It was
Anthem.
God bless.
Man. It might have happened with Avengers too, to somebody that you know.
To you?
Was it you, Kyle?
Oh no!
I was like, asking for a friend.
I caught you playing it.
Asking for a friend.
No, I did play it months after it was when it was $7.
Yeah, you should have known better.
I feel like that's I just going back to the story. I remember actually the moment it happened. We were at our place. Me and Steve were living together, and I keep saying living together. It sounds weird to say that. We were roommates.
Why?
We were cohabitating.
But we were all hanging out, and we were talking about games, and it was right in front of my room. And I think this particular person was about to leave. And we were just kind of like, oh yeah, just kind of wrap it up. And then I was mentioning some game and they said, yeah, I actually pre-ordered Anthem. And I was like, oh really? And they're like, yeah, it looks so excited. And I was like, hey man, I'm going to be super real with you.
You need to cancel that pre-order.
I was like,
man,
I've been watching that game for a minute. And from the day they dropped it at E3, I knew it was not legitimate. I would just be temper your expectations. And he was like, well, I don't want to be, I want to temper my expectations, but I think, I'm excited for it. And I was like, and the next time I remember I waited quite a while and I said, hey man, we never talked about Anthem. They were like they didn't even, they were just like, I don't want to talk about it. And I was like, cool.
Oh man. That game.
I think the situation, my experience was that I was making fun of it or mentioning some meme about it or something. He's like, "Yeah, I pre-ordered that." And he has he has a very interesting affectation he does. It's like this like depressing, like Charlie Brown, sad, sad music kind of thing he does. Yeah. And you had that out in full force. It's like, yeah, I pre-ordered.
Yeah, I think that was.
Like,
I think that's the exact thing that happened. Like you said that, and then we were like, I don't know, because we were all standing there because it was definitely you must have done it because I definitely didn't bring it up.
Touchy subject.
Poor guy.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's just like. Yeah, I think the industry overall is pretty smart. So, like, I don't necessarily think... I was going to say this. I will say this. Just as a general gamer, I have a lot of grace for performance in games. Like, that is not nearly the most important thing to me. Like, I think I mentioned this in the Discord, but I never had a good computer ever growing up. So, like, I remember I had to play Guild Wars, the original Guild Wars, on my computer at the lowest possible setting. Everything turned down. And it still was like 15 frames per second. And I still played that game. So...
Oh, yeah.
And
a mess out of those games.
And I remember in college, my computer wasn't as good as everybody else's computer. And I didn't realize that YouTube actually ran at like 24 frames per second. Or 30 frames per second. I was used to seeing it kind of choppy. And it wasn't...
slideshows.
Yeah, it wasn't until I saw it on somebody else's screen. I was like, hey, what's wrong with your computer? Like, I thought something was wrong with their computer.
It's too smooth.
It looks too good.
I was like, are you doing some kind of weird, like, V-Sync on the video? I was just trying to figure out what was going on. And so I think out of the box... Like, I would play Elden Ring, and I probably wouldn't even say anything about the frame drops. I'd just be like, I just play it, because I'm expecting it. I played Bug Snacks, and it had frame drops. So, like, I don't expect, Elden Ring to be perfect. But I think the problem is, you told me it was perfect. You told me, and you didn't even mention it. Like, nobody even said anything. It was just like, And that's my problem.
It feels underhanded on the other side of it, because I guess the expectations... Because I think somebody mentioned it earlier, if it was GoldenEye and it had frame drops, that would have affected the score. And so, like, the idea, I think, is that if a game, like, in order to be perfect, the performance has to be at a certain level, too. Like, that's not something that you would forgive and still give it a perfect score based on the criteria that other things have been harshly or negatively impacted by.
Yeah.
And so it's like it's a disconnect, because like maybe if they didn't like the I don't know what else I guess could fit in something that would be forgivable to not impact the score, but certainly
I would say
performance.
I would say this.
Would be one
I think Steve made a good point that they might have been on a different version, so maybe they didn't note it, right? So I'll give them that. But the other thing is, I would say that Breath of the Wild wasn't perfect, right? Like in the sense of frames, right? But I think one thing about it was that even while I played the experience, it happened from time to time, but it wasn't like something I expected or wasn't consistent. It wasn't happening all the time. And I think
that's a good point.
And I think like a game doesn't have to be perfect. Its performance doesn't have to be perfect. But I think that when you have an issue that's kind of systemic feeling, like just always happening, like Breath of the Wild, like if you have like a whole bunch of bombs go off and like a whole bunch of people around, like, okay, that makes sense. Like, this is just
if you're in
nature.
The Lost
But like
Woods.
if you're just running through the field in Elden Ring and I guess the frame drops, then maybe you're a little bit like, why would you do that? That feels weird,
So I think there's another difference, I would say several more major differences about Legend of Zelda. One, you're right that it's only in certain areas, like in the Lost Woods with all the Koroks around and stuff.
It's really bad.
For some reason, it just chugs in those sections. But usually it's like really clean. The other issue is that Zelda isn't really that impacted by frame drops. Like, it's not as pretty.
Oh, I guess.
But it doesn't. The gameplay doesn't require like precise timing as much.
Yeah.
The other thing, Zelda doesn't have a performance mode, right? Like in PlayStation, you can turn for Elden Ring. You can have it like pretty mode, where I think it's locked to 30 frames per second, or I don't know what it is. I haven't researched it, but there's a performance mode that's supposed to lock it at 60 frames per second at the expense of the visual fidelity. Mm-hmm. And people are playing in performance mode and it's not locked at 60.
That's
so it's
a
like
problem.
that's a promise that has been expressly broken. Yes. The other
How many
difference
others? One more other.
is that Legend of Zelda is playing on a 5-year-old chipset on the Nintendo Switch, not on a beefy PC or a PlayStation 5
PS5, right.
that runs Ratchet and Clank at like 120 FPS or some crap. You know, like
beautifully.
that's not the, we don't expect Legend of Zelda to have perfect performance because it's on Nintendo Switch.
That's fair.
We don't expect any game.
Matter of fact, we expect it to have lower performance. That's a part of it.
Matter of fact, exactly.
Have a low performance mode.
When people showed off clips on YouTube of the frame drops and stuff in Legend of Zelda, they weren't making fun of Nintendo because of the software. They were making fun of Nintendo for the hardware.
Got him.
Right? That's the difference.
That's a good point. That's good. I never thought about it
pretty
that
much
way.
Unanimous.
Yeah. So there's really no excuse for the performance to be that wonky.
I think that's another thing too, is that this next generation of games, as they call it, hasn't been consistent on the hardware front. And it's been very odd because
Wait, what do you mean?
Well, a lot of the games that have been coming out on, the PS5 and the Xbox Xbox X have like
you had a head. Did you just have another stroke? What just happened?
No, that's the name of it. That's the name of this one, isn't it?
Yes.
The fridge.
The marketing team had a stroke.
Yeah. But from what I've understood, maybe I'm wrong about the Xbox side of things, but at least on the PlayStation, a lot of games have had performance issues. And so it's not like abnormal, which maybe I'm remembering incorrectly, but I don't remember this being like a huge thing on like generations before, where launch titles and early releases on the new consoles, especially ones that have a version on the last gen console, have run poorly.
Well,
am I remembering that incorrectly?
Well, I think.
Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
You want to go ahead?
Yeah, all I was gonna say is that it's okay to me, especially early in the console, early on the releases. Like that's people are trying to figure out the hardware, right? So it is what it is. Like it's just a part of it, and yeah, people complain about it. It does come up. It does happen. But I think what really makes this stick out more is that like the PlayStation 5 has been around for a while, even though people haven't been able to get a hand on it. It's been around for a while. And Elden Ring represented one of the first real next gen games, right? Like it's supposed to be the next gen, And I think, especially it's been around for a while, I just feel like it just had a higher expectation, like Steve was saying, like people, and especially since I don't know, like you just have, there's a certain expectation from FromSoft, number one, but also it's just like the anticipation and how good it looked and it's running on this hardware and da-da-da. I just think the expectation is different. I don't know. Steve, what were you going to say?
I'm not sure if I remember exactly what I was going to say.
I already forgot. So
I've been pretty good about not forgetting what I was going to say, but
it'll come back around.
I said everything that you were going to say, so that's why.
You took the words right out of my head.
So we're kind of like coming toward the end of our discussion, but I did want to come back to the concept of our own perfect game. So I want to ask you guys you guys had any games that you personally rate as a 10 out of 10. I know, Steve, you don't believe in rating games by numbers, and it's interesting.
Sure,
because
but a perfect game I can get behind.
You get behind the concept of the perfect game, but it's interesting. I also think it's interesting that like, of all of us, I would say that you're the most have an affinity for numbers, aka doing physics and probably being good at math. That's
the trick, actually. I have an affinity for letters. That's why I did physics.
X, Y.
It's all coefficients
and sigma and
psi.
Oh no!
I don't speak Greek, but I can read it.
But yeah. So what's your 10? Your perfect game? Do you guys have one that comes to mind when you think of a perfect?
Steve?
I would say Hollow Knight.
Hollow Knight.
Knew what's coming.
I don't think anyone's surprised. Yeah.
What game is that?
It's the one with the bugs.
Oh, it's a dude who has
Bug Snacks.
Oh, is that the dude who has a bucket on his head or something like that? I don't know.
I think Hollow Knight is essentially a perfect game and especially by the the criteria that we came up with earlier, which is that it does what it sets out to do. I think all the decisions that were made regarding the development of the game were essentially perfect. Were good decisions, and I think the implementation of the decisions was essentially perfect. I think the difficulty is great. The music is just gorgeous. The art is gorgeous. All the bugs are either cute and endearing or kind of terrifying. I mean, I've had legit experiences playing this game that I'll remember probably for a long time. And it's only $15.
Hey, a steal.
It's a steal. It's honestly a steal. It's $15 at most. Sometimes it's on sale.
Okay.
Man, awesome.
Oh, also I got a ton of free DLC, and it's just a lot of fun.
Okay.
Yeah. So I have what I consider to be a perfect game. It's not a new game, but it was a game that was a fantastic sequel. It had great multiplayer, both local and online. The gameplay holds up tremendously to this day. It aged well. It aged super well. There were, like little glitches and bugs, but nothing game breaking, and a lot of them like positively exploitative because the developers knew a lot of them existed, and you'd have to do like crazy things to get them to work. And so, in a lot of times, you could exploit them to find secrets within the game and stuff. But I think I have to say, for me, perfect game was Halo 2.
Oh, okay.
That's a really interesting take.
Continue.
Yeah, and so maybe it's a bit nostalgia.
Continue, please. I won't stop you.
Well, I wasn't going to stop. I just interrupted. So, no.
Dang.
I don't have a whole lot more to say. I mean, I don't intend to like defend my decision, but I think the criteria on what makes a game perfect is in itself subjective too. And so I guess based on what I value from a game, both logistically, if you will, did the game hold up for its time? Does it hold up now-ish? What my experiences were with the game. Playing the game relatively recently, the last couple of years. Was my experience still good? Was it how I remembered? Did they improve upon the game in later releases? Yes. Do I think that affects that game? In a way, yes, because it shows a lot of things that it missed. But I think in its own right, it's a perfect game for all intents and purposes. Going back to, I guess, the main piece of criteria for me, did it set out to do what it intended to do? I give that a yes.
Okay.
It didn't finish the story.
Finish the fight.
I'm kidding. Sorry.
it never stopped. No, that's real. I think a game that I never mentioned. I don't think I've mentioned it on any podcast so far, and maybe I'm wrong. If I did, maybe it was like in a moment where I passed out and I was speaking in my sleep. But like, it's a game that honestly might be the game that I've spent the most time in my life.
Stardew Valley.
No, not Stardew Valley. It's a game that to this day, oh my goodness, I said to this day. To this day, that has if I am in the right setting, people mention my ability with it. And Steve probably knows this game. But it's Super Smash Bros. Melee. And Melee, in many ways, to me, is a perfect game because it delivers exactly what it's meant to do. Like, putting you in a place where you can play with your friends, that you can play all these different characters. It almost is like an infinite game. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can pretty much play it forever as long as you have people who you want to play it with. And I think for me, particularly because I played the original Smash Brothers on the N64, I had super high expectations, like through the roof. Like, the only option they had was to fail me. And they succeed. They went beyond my expectations, and on and on. And I played it for hours and hours. It's a dark part of my life because I played it so much, and my grades were so bad, and I, like it was just really, really bad. And
it was a dangerous game.
It was a dangerous game, and honestly, the only reason why I probably don't play Smash Brothers Melee anymore is because of the community. Because the community is so toxic, and I can't have that energy in my life. But I just loved playing it. I loved meeting new people who played it. I loved like somebody telling me, "Oh, I'm good at this game," and then let's see what really happens, or meeting that secretly incredibly good person who you've never heard of, or the person from another college or another state, or it was just like this universal experience. And I think the game, as much as Nintendo never wants it to be like a competitive game, which I can understand, it really brought the collaborative competitiveness to the most real level I've ever played, where you're literally trying to beat up all your friends, but you're having fun doing it, in the best way. So
yeah,
that's.
I mean, that was my introduction to fighting games. I feel like Smash 64 technically was first, but like Melee was when it felt like it got huge.
Yeah, I played Melee first.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it just kind of depends on when you... Like, I still to this day remember the commercial for the original 64 one. It said, "It's me and you, it's you and me." That commercial used
those costumes
used to give me chills. Watching it now, it's such like a cheesy, like they're wearing costume. You know what I'm saying?
It was like sinister.
Yeah, but it was like, what is happening? Why did Kirby just,
I mean, there was so much potential for lore and world building in the series. So here's a question: do you feel like looking back on Melee, especially compared to newer games that are like objectively better, but also like looking back on Melee and just seeing how buggy it is, right? Like I follow this YouTuber and he just breaks down like all the really fun and interesting and weird bugs in Melee. Like, does that detract from your idea of the perfect game? Do you feel like Smash Bros. Ultimate being a generally, like, all right, I said it was objectively better. It's better in almost every way. Yeah. There are probably some ways that people like Melee better, but in a lot of respects, it's just building on Melee. So does that make you feel like it's not the perfect game anymore? Or is this, like, where does this come from?
I think, and you're saying Ultimate, it would be a better version, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I won't say Brawl, because
Brawl
took away too much and didn't give us anything.
Brawl's the best version.
Oh, gosh.
Unarguable.
Project M is the best version.
Project M is probably the best version. But I think it's interesting because during that period of time, like, I think glitchy games was kind of the standard. Like, I think it's hard for me. I'm like trying to think back, but I never saw glitches in pretty much any game unless it was like soft locking my game or breaking my game in a way that like fundamentally I couldn't play it. Did I see it as a detriment? I actually kind of saw it as a plus.
It's a quirk.
Yeah, it's a quirk. It's something that made it have personality. And I think actually the reason that Melee is the perfect game is because somehow the glitchiness of the game actually made it better. Like wave dashing and all. I mean, L canceling, everything that is like pretty much.
Those aren't the glitches I'm talking about. I'm talking about like
game breaking stuff.
Yeah, things like Luigi having an invisible barrier over his head if you do some arbitrary set of actions.
Yeah. Oh. But that's the thing. Like, that's, to me, like, there's plenty. Like, there's the black hole glitch. There's like the Pikachu, the Jigglypuff 999 glitch. Like, there's a lot of stuff. But
the hole in the middle of Pokemon Stadium.
But a lot of those glitches, number one, you had to be in a very, very particular conditions, and you had to kind of like, I don't know, be kind of crazy to find them. And also, most of those glitches didn't affect this moment-to-moment gameplay. Like, I knew about a lot of them, and all my friends knew about them, but like, you would literally have to get all your friends to help you to accomplish a lot of these glitches,
You wouldn't experience them.
Yeah, you wouldn't experience them. And then the ones that were in the game really just became gameplay. Like like L canceling and wave dashing, all those things are like those are not supposed to be things.
If they were repeatable,
but
repeatable glitches,
I wouldn't count them as glitches. I know they're not intended behavior.
Yeah,
but
I mean,
they're not.
To me, it's a glitch if you're not supposed to be able to do it. And,
they're just repeatable,
you know, and you can use them to your benefit. So
yeah.
I just think that endeared the game, and I think the glitches in general were never like game breaking. And also, like I said, during that period of time, I think I was a lot more gracious toward glitches. I think I like them still now, but most of them are just game breaking.
I had a lot more affinity for games that were like funny and goofy. I remember playing iNinja, and there's this dumb. It wasn't a glitch; it was a cheat. But it would just make his bed. It's the art is like kind of chibi ninja kind of character. But you could make his head humongous.
Yes.
And I think it even made his hurt box humongous too. Like it made the game worse.
Oh.
But it was still so fun to play.
I missed the day of cheats, man.
Yes, cheats are gone, man. Big head cheats, invincibility cheats, infinite cash cheats, all of them. Man.
Like the input, having to input them, it was just so satisfying. Like it was the whole experience. Like at the time, it was annoying, but once they took them away, it's like we didn't know what we had, man.
Yeah. And
cheatcc.com. I remember.
Game Facts.
Yeah.
Game Facts.
The Game Facts.
That's where I got all mine from.
Or I'd buy the little booklets.
Oh.
I got 1,001 cheats or whatever.
The thing is, like, Game Informer had cheats in the back, but it never was for a game that I had. It was always some, like, random game. I was like, I'm like, I gotta get lucky.
I'll remember this.
You know?
Oh, and Game Sharks.
Those Sharks, yo.
Crazy.
One of my friends had that, and we would just go crazy with that thing, man. Yeah, I think that was like in the days where like there were so many barriers. When I mean barriers, I mean that literally, like physical barriers, like invisible barriers, like sky. So like it was just cool to like with that game Boundary Break or whatever. Like it was kind of like cool to experience that in the real world. And also I think games at that time, not that they didn't take themselves so seriously. It's just that they weren't designed in a way that if you all of a sudden gave somebody invincibility, that the game would be broken. Like, it would just continue like normal, you know? But I feel like you couldn't use some of those glitches in, like, say, God of War, because you need to, at certain moments, like, since it's kind of like a immersive cinematic experience, like, you can't not have Kratos take damage or, you know what I'm saying? Or something like that. So yeah, that's it. No, that was a good question. I never thought about it that way, but yeah. So, well, I mean, all I'm gonna say, guys, is that clearly our podcast is a 10 out of 10, and the perfect
11 out of 10.
We've done everything we set out to do.
Yes, we did. We really did. We covered everything. This will actually be an accurate representation of what we said we were going to talk about, and but yeah, man, I think overall, I mean, you know, once again, perfection is subjective. 10 out of 10 is subjective. But I think, you know, it's just interesting what game journalism has become over the years, what games have become. I want to have a whole discussion kind of about, like, the idea of, like, games becoming more open but less free. I don't know if that makes any sense. Like,
no, it makes no sense.
Like, you can play a game like Breath of the Wild, but in its open world, but you can't like experience it exactly the way you wanted to. Like you can't force yourself to have the cheat codes. You can't just be like completely free. You're always kind of like limited. You always have to play by the rules of the game. Well, back in the day, you could just play a game and just, like you said, big head mode. Like imagine Zelda Breath of the Wild with big head mode. How awesome that would be, you know? Like it's.
I'm sure there's a mod somewhere
for it.
And also, I did want to make a promise to you, Steve, about the music podcast. We will do that, but the only song we're allowed to review is "Treasuring You" by Namata. Treasuring you, and that's the only song we can review on our podcast. I found.
Is that a song about booty?
You said what?
I found.
It's actually a Sea of Thieves theme song. So
Treasure. Sea of Thieves.
But
and Soul Pumpkin Pumpkin.
Soul Pumpkin Pumpkin. Ow, ow, ow.
from Overblood 2.
Overblood 2. Those are the only songs we can review. So it'll be the best. But anyway, let's just wrap this up. So number one, thank you, Kyle, for your time. I really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you, Steve.
10 out of 10.
10 out of 10. Thank you, Steve, for your time.
Don't thank me. Thank Nintendo for sponsoring this piece.
Breath of the Wild 2, the best game that you have yet to play. Yo, I'm gonna say this real quick. On Twitter, somebody posted, "Yo, they just released the Breath of the Wild's new."
I saw
you
that.
know, and it was just a troll. I was like, "Y'all wrong for that." But Breath of the Wild 2's name. But anyway,
it was so good though.
Good.
Like it was perfectly timed because they would do something like that on the tail end of Elden Ring being released. Like that's 100%.
So it was
eat their lunch.
So anyway, thank you everybody for listening. Super Agile family, Super Agile brothers, Super Agile sisters. As always, we really appreciate your listening. We appreciate your comments. We appreciate our Discord. Shout out to our Discord.
Discord!
It's been a good time talking, chatting. The next wave may be coming soon, so check your inbox. No, we don't know. We're gonna figure that out.
Check your DMs.
Don't
I'm not making promises. I'm just check your inbox. I'm saying check your inbox. You might have email.
Listen to Steve's new single
I'll
to find the
I was just saying that
password.
as a statement. Check your inbox. You may have mail. But anyway,
From someone.
But anyway, no, thank you everybody. Thank you for listening to our show. It's a blast. We enjoy talking about these topics. If you have any suggestions or things that you'd like us to consider talking about, once again, we can't promise that we'll talk about everything. We barely have enough time to talk about what we are talking about. Please, leave them in the comments. Send them to us on Twitter at the SAB Podcast. And of course, drop them in the Discord. Thank you so much for listening. And as always, y'all take it easy. Peace.